Coming up, the only guarantee in life is death, taxes, and the Brooklyn Nets blowing fourth quarter leads. We dive in on the loss at home at the hands of the Knicks coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And Doug, 108-103, a loss at home to the New York Knicks. And you'd say, hey, they're a good basketball team. That must have been a fun game to watch. Turns out it was violently painful. He's going to pop right in here off that hot mute. He knows how to work it.
There we go. Just another fourth quarter disaster. Two back-to-back games now where the Nets just completely fold in the fourth quarters. If you combine the Clippers game and the Knicks game, those two teams scored 73 points against the Nets in the fourth quarter. The Nets have scored 33 points. They've been outscored by 40 points in the last two games. In games they were up, double digits or more in a couple of these games. They had the leads, and they just completely and utterly fold. And it's a confluence of problems. They look discombobulated. They look like the other team's going to lose. Or the other team feels like they can win. The Nets just feel like they can lose. It looks like those kinds of situations. This is like a personal thing. I remember back. So real quick, I'm going to explain. This is going to take 2 seconds. I played soccer in college. Our team was okay. 1 year you'll see what I'm going in a second. 1 year we were playing a team that was much better than us, and we came out and scored 2 quick goals. And I remember going for the kickoff, like going for like the restart. Mm-hmm. And those guys said, well, I remember one guy said, "I'm not worried about it. We're still going to beat you guys." And I remember I was like, "Oh man!" And I believed it, and we lost. And that is all I can think about. Now I don't think I was like that every game, but that particular one, I remember they were so confident that I was like, two goals is not safe, and we ended up losing 3-2. That's what I thought about these last two games, where they go into these situations and it looks like they have no chance, to the point where we were joking about it, but going into the fourth quarter, it was like, it feels like this is just kind of destined to happen. I hate being like that as a fan. I think it's a really, really bad place to be. And this team has just not given you any confidence that they can close games out in any form or fashion. And that's just kind of endemic with the slide that they're on right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you said it there. I don't like to be this way, but going to the fourth, the Nets were up by 9, and I said, the Knicks have them right.
How can you be any other way? Sorry to interrupt you. How can you be any other way? Like, sorry, go ahead.
No, right, 100% right. Like, and you and I, who I think do a good job and pride ourselves at being objective and keeping even keeled and not kind of swinging too hard on the pendulum of things. It's kind of impossible, especially in back-to-back games like this and over this run that they've now been on, to not feel like if it can go wrong, it is going to go wrong. And even though the Nets end up losing this one by 5 points in the fourth quarter, it's worth noting, like, it's not just that they had a 9-point lead going to the fourth. They also were still up by 8 after Lonnie Walker hit a jump shot at the 7-12 mark in this game. Like, so it's not in the fourth quarter. It's not just that they get to the fourth quarter. It's also that, like, it takes a while for the team to overtake them, but it's a slow bleed process. And to your point about, having that sense of the other team, you mentioned playing in the game and saying like, we're going to be okay here. It's even more than that. It feels like to me when it comes to Brooklyn right now, because not only is the other team, because the Knicks aren't necessarily a juggernaut by any sense, but they're a very, very good team right now and getting better. They traded for OG. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But it's that the Nets, the equivalent of this would be, you scored 2 goals to go up early in that game, and at the restart, you looked across to them and said, hey, we don't feel great about our chances. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it feels like. It's on the Nets side of it where they lack confidence, because in a lot of ways, that's what feels like happens in these fourth quarters. Is this is where you come out, you kind of just keep playing consistently as you have, and the other team goes away. This happens in the NBA all the time. Hey, it's not going to be our night. We're a better team. We know we're going to win more basketball games, but they got us here. Instead, it's almost like the Nets entice the other team. Hey, keep coming at us. Come on, guys. You can get over this hump if you just keep grinding here. And these are all, I know these aren't things that are real when it comes to how players focus and how they drive and their intention and what they want to accomplish. But everything that you thought wouldn't go well for the Brooklyn Nets in that fourth quarter went exactly that way, including the final sequence where you're down and it's the play all works out. Wide open shot for Cam Johnson. I'm not just picking on him here, but of course it wasn't going to go in. How could it possibly go in based on everything that they've taught us over these last 20 plus games?
And it's a sign of the sort of I would call it like almost like disorganization / unclear outcome based, like sort of like decision making, right? So like the lineups for these games have been all different. The rotations look all weird. I don't even think the team knows, like, when they're going into the final minutes, who's might even be closing. I mean, like when you look at across the aisle at some of these other teams, like the Knicks, even without Hartenstein, or the Clippers, like they at least know who their core guys are going to be, right? It's going to like, tonight, it's going to be Brunson. It's going to be Randall. It's going to be OG. These guys are going to close with these guys, and like sort of where they can turn if things are going to go bad. The same with the Clippers, right? Now those teams have like sort of more high end talent, but you see the opposite happening with the Nets. Their fourth quarter rotations are all out of whack. You're not sure on a game to game basis who's like even going to be closing. They were throwing out lineups. I mean, at one point, what really solidified it for me, and we'll get into Dinwiddie like much later here. Yeah. But what solidified it for me is the moment where he checks back in. It's the fourth quarter. He checks back in. It's him, Lonnie Walker, Cam Thomas. I was like going to like fire off a tweet to say, what is the thought process here? Like, why are these? And but by the way, I couldn't even get it out because 1 minute later they checked him out.
Right.
So, and I was like, oh, this is what's happening. They don't know if they're coming or going. Like he checks in for 1 minute and checks literally right back out of the game. So that is just a sign. That's not even Dinwiddie related. It's just organization related. Like they don't even know what combinations they want to play. They're always trying to pick this up on the fly. And when you get down to where the games really matter in the fourth quarter, you're seeing other teams who kind of have their S together dismantle them. Yeah. Because they already know what they're going to do. They already know the plan, and the Nets don't know the plan, and it's now happening time and time again.
And the irony that the thing that we talked about at the start of the year and early on about, all right, well, they don't have the elite level talent, but they are very deep, right? And that's such a strength for them. That actually seems to have created now a problem for them when it comes to these rotations, these combinations, these closing lineups. Some guys are performing better. Some guys are performing worse right now. But just to your point, familiarity, consistency, continuity. When you keep rotating different closing lineups, well, where's the expectation level, right? It only takes a half a step to have your teammate not make the back cut you thought he was going to, right? Or especially defensively, not get the rotation quite where you thought it was. And although I will point out here, there was a sequence, we'll talk more in depth, where both Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges were basically walking step and step behind one another, defending on the perimeter and leaving a wide open triple on the right wing. So communication issues abound here, obviously. The Brooklyn Nets lose this game, obviously, 108-103. We will get into Spencer Dinwiddie coming up here in a minute. There's also something that I do want to point out. I am going to trend a little bit positive here, ever so briefly, Doug, about something that I think the Nets can carry forward in the remainder of this season. We'll get into that in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, make myself feel a little bit better here. That's because if you're heading into 2024, if you're trying to eat a little healthier, I'll tell you right now, Hungry Root is the answer. It's here to rescue you from your short-lived resolutions, making meal planning super easy and very nutritious, building healthy habits. That's not going to disappear by February right around the corner. So maybe headed out with some of those New Year's resolutions, not going to be the case. When you got Hungry Root, is the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality food delivered to your door. They got healthy groceries, simple recipes. It's all in one place. All you do on Hungry Root, you take a fun little short quiz. They're going to get to know you, your goals, how you like to eat. They'll ask you what flavors you like, what the appliances you like to use, much more to keep your needs and preferences at the top of mind when they're building your cart with all those delicious recipes. Goes beyond your weekly grocery haul with thousands of easy recipes. Actually put groceries to good use before they get forgotten in the back of your fridge. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On Nets listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you, hungryroot.com/lockedon. And you're done with that. Head on over to eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll like this, your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue the post-game podcast here on the Locked On Nets podcast, we remind you, if you want a little extra taste of some of the key moments throughout Nets history, and not all of them have been great, head over to wegotnets.com, sign up with your email, and you're going to get a nice little mailer coming out to you, breaking down Jason Kidd era, the end of the superstar era, some other really fun moments as well. But it's a great way just to kind of take a little walk back through Nets history and also keep yourself in the loop, as we have some really exciting things that we're going to be rolling out for all the Brooklyn Nets faithful. In spite, Doug, of what's been going on lately on the court, we're still locked into this team. We're not going anywhere. It's just that we're going to hear us maybe get a little bit more irritated. I want to talk about the glaring visual in this game from the Knicks and Nets side of things when they stepped onto the court. But just before I do, the one thing that I want to say positively coming out of this game is, if you think that the Nets are going to make decisions when it comes to the deadline and move on from some veterans, we'll talk about Spencer Dinwiddie, you have to at least be encouraged by the fact that you do get like good performances out of a guy like Dennis Smith Jr. Lonnie Walker has a quiet night, has a bad shooting night here. But you're seeing, I think, these sample sizes, specifically with Dennis Smith Jr., that like, hey, we have some guys here that are just going to kind of naturally step into larger roles, I think, in another few weeks. Now, the Nets can prove me wrong on this, but I do want to try to take away the idea that this is why you had this depth on this roster coming in. It's not translating to wins right now, but it does translate to having guys that could be a part of the long-term future of this team. That's as bright and optimistic as I can go.
Well, also, we skipped over it too before we get to this last thing. It's like Bridges did have a great game. It gets totally lost. Like, he scores 36 points on 14 for 26 shooting. Like, the 3-pointer comes all the way back. Like, and
career high.
We're gonna end that
on the arc there. Yeah,
it's gonna get lost in the muck and the mire here because the loss takes center stage. Getting Bridges like sort of like back on track with scoring is what you like to see. It's another brutal case where they should not, it's terrible to lose these big scoring games. They have lost a few of these this season where he's turned in some big numbers. Yep. So, if we're just trying to take out a few positives here, I agree with your sentiment. And also, we're going to end up not spending a ton of time on a 36-point game, which would not usually be the case, but when you just blow another massive fourth quarter lead, I don't know how you sit and talk about Bridges 36 points. It's a shame, but it'd be remiss to not at least mention it, right?
Yeah, 5 out of the last 7 games for him, he's been 26 points or better for the Brooklyn Nets, and the other 2 were 17 and 21. So good performances from him, yes. And to your point, it's like, this is the thing that we kind of talked about for a while. When is he going to get it together? And as he starts to kind of turn it on, it of course has to come in these games where the Nets can't seem to scrape together wins. Visually, Doug, I'm all about visual aids. When the teams took the court tonight, and also when some subs came in, just the sheer size difference between the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Knicks was just palpable. You see Precious Achiuwa standing next to Nicholas Claxton, you're like, my God. You see Julius Randle, who is a big guy, but you're like, well, Dorian Finney-Smith, you don't look particularly large next to him. Even all the way, it's not even about guys that are tall. It's all the way down to Jalen Brunson. You're like, well, he's just a thick body. He's got some muscle to him to be able to go into the paint. OG Anunoby looks enormous. I think he got bigger just by putting on a Knicks uniform from coming from Toronto. That, to me, to say nothing of Jericho Sims, who you thought, Hardenstein will be out. Watch the Nets kind of take advantage. No, it turns out he's going to block 4 shots in the first quarter alone in this game. It just, we've often mentioned this too about how the Nets have length and they have these wingspans. Great. It does not change the fact when you are outgained by mass, probably by 40% in totality on the court tonight.
Yeah, look, it was like the strength it has been a real problem against some of these other guys. It was a problem again tonight. You mentioned, Randall, Brunson, and it's good to mention Brunson too, because he's a really, really strong player, like the low center of gravity, and he can just stop on an absolute dime, and he can just get his shoulder into you and create space. And he just does all these little things that just, you think you got him stopped, and then all of a sudden, all of a sudden he's kind of wormed his way to the basket again. Or it's Randall where he's just got you down in the block and he's put a shoulder into you and then he puts another shoulder into you and it's a layup, right?
Yep.
Like, and those things are really evident when you see it, especially with a team that has even like Josh Hart, like they can kind of bring it in across the board. That's why I joked before about if they were to trade for DeJounte Murray, it's like, okay, well, that'd be interesting. They go from the skinniest team in the league to the skinniest team in the league. Like it's just funny that would kind of fit the mold of player that the Nets have kind of brought in here. And yeah, it doesn't happen every single game where you see it really highlighted or really accentuated, but this was definitely one of them. And it was all game long. Like, and it doesn't just mean, out-strengthening someone on just like a physical rebound or going for a ball, like just creating the space that they need to get the shots that they want off. Like Randall has shots that he wants to get off. Brunson has shots that he wants to get off. The Nets have trouble with players like that in providing a lot of resistance. They have trouble providing a lot of resistance around a lot of different archetypes. But this one was for sure a problem that you kind of saw all game long. Yeah. There were times where they stymied it a little bit, but it's just another example of, the Nets not being a certain way and other teams finding ways to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and again, it's like even that too. I feel like when we come in after these losses, you look at 1,000 different bullet points, right? I mean, it can be as simple as you got outscored 32-18 in the fourth quarter, right? I know that's where we started this conversation. Another blown fourth quarter lead. The trend where you won the first and third quarters. You had mentioned this going back to the last episode where I think they had won 6 or 7 quarters in a row before they had that blown fourth quarter against the Clippers. Yep. Well, they won 2 out of 3 in the first 3 quarters tonight. And again, you get to that fourth quarter and it starts to get away from you. And frankly, the Nets outshot the Knicks here from beyond the arc 36 to 35% effectively, but they took 42 from deep here. The fact that this team, and something that we haven't really mentioned specifically about this roster overall, they have gone the total opposite direction when it comes to the perimeter shooting in totality. They are the worst team in the league. And when you come into a season and you're going to hang your hat, not only on that you're a three-point shooting team and you have a lot of guys that can do it, but that we're going to do it at volume, well, guess what? That's how you walk yourself into real problems here. And it's one of the points I want to make sure we got to, that they had a lot of open looks. Like that there is a little part of this story is not just about Knicks being more physical, not just about the collapse. There are a lot of moments where there are a lot of wide open looks that the process is correct and the result is poor. The problem right now is that, unfortunately, the results have been consistently poor, and it just feels like there is certainly a angst around this team as they approach that deadline. That's not to give excuses, but it just feels like everybody in the organization has some level of so what's going to happen next? And it ties into the theme you mentioned. There's no organizational set idea from the top, off the court, all the way down onto the court, and the sets and rotations you're going to run.
And to go back to the 3-point shooting for a second, it's an example of the Nets, this current roster has no room for error. Like they have no margin for error. They don't have the ways, they're not getting coached up in ways that are really elevating the team at all. They're not running offensive sets that, they ran some early sets that I really liked with Cam Johnson. They were running Johnson off motion stuff to get him on Brunson over and over again and basically shooting over him. I was like, oh, this works. They never did it again. He was 4 for 4. And then he came back in and took 2 more shots in the next 8 minutes. They don't even the things that work, they don't necessarily go back to. And then, they don't have, teams have margin for when to use the Knicks as an example. You have Brunson and Randall. It's hey, break glass in case of emergency. We can get Randall in the block. Mm-hmm. We can get Brunson one-on-one and try to pivot his way. Maybe he can get to the line. They have these little ways that they can kind of recenter themselves. The Nets don't have that. So once they don't have that, and then they also don't make their threes, it's kind of just booked. You know what I mean? What are they going to do? There's no other way for them to win. And this has been a story for the last few weeks now. They can't hit the threes with any kind of consistency. And when that's going to happen, I can just tell you what the ending of the story is going to be. Because and it's actually highlighting of when you even get this Mikal Bridges game, it's great, you got it. You didn't hit the threes. You can't win. Right. They can't win. And it's a really tough road to hoe if that's just going to be the style they play, because they're not getting floor elevation anywhere else. Like I said, the coaching is clearly not there. The motivation to stick all the way through these games is not there. The rotations are not there. If all that's not going to be there, and then you're also not going to hit the threes, Hey, this is why you're 2-11 over the last 14 or whatever, 2-13. Or I'm making these numbers up because there's so many losses I can't even count them. All right, we'll get into some more stuff here in a second. I do want to mention, I do want to talk briefly about Dinwiddie, and we are going to stay after everyone over it. We've got a ton of people in YouTube Live, much appreciated there. So we'll stay after and do some YouTube Live stuff. We'll get all into the rest of that here in a second. First, I'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Regular season for the NFL totally wrapped up, but that's right, baby. We're in the playoffs. It's time to get in the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. What has to happen with that $5 bet? Who cares? Win or lose, you're getting 150 in bonus bets no matter what. What can you use the 150 in bonus bets on? All the best stuff that they got going on FanDuel. They have the live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make parlays in the Parlay Hub where you just pile everything you want to get in there together. You can find the really popular ones that other folks are putting in as well. So much more. I love to get into the player props over on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we tie a bow here on the Locked On Nets podcast, post-game edition, as the Brooklyn Nets fall at home, 108-103 to the New York Knicks. There are a handful of guys that I want to get to here. Spencer Dinwiddie, first and foremost. I do also want to touch on Cameron Johnson because it's an all-time great start, and then kind of a classic Cameron Johnson, never get used again. And you were kind of mentioning some of the sets they were specifically running there. Spencer Dinwiddie, you mentioned this at the top, came in for a minute and went back out, essentially got benched for the last quarter and a half of this game. I think the question that I'm running up against here now is, and this goes back to agendas and what are you trying to serve here? I get it. Guys got to play, got to fill minutes. But if there is some type of clear disconnect here, I am hard-pressed to think of another player on another roster in the NBA that is a guaranteed lock to start and also a guaranteed lock to be on the bench to finish the game. And that's what we've seen over these last couple for Spencer Dinwiddie.
I mean, the line was horrific. 19 minutes, 0 points, 0 rebounds, 4 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 1 turnover. There was one point where he had an assist on a Mikal Bridges. It was in the third quarter. He had an assist on a Bridges spot up, and they called his name, and I actually was like, oh, I legit forgot he was playing. I just forgot that he was even on the court, and I actually had to go back at that point and check how many minutes he had actually even played, and that's when I noticed that the stat line was just, a bunch of zeros. And because he just hadn't shown up, hadn't shown up on the screen. Right. And I was like, 17 minutes, my God, what has been going on here? Well, the answer was nothing. And I just don't really know.
Didn't finish with a team high +7 though, if we're just being clear.
Good for him. It's just such a weird, I mean, there's been, the rumors that he's, on this, kind of, someone else said strike. And I think that was aggregated a little bit, but the part where it's like maybe he was looking for a way out and that kind of comes out and then he goes 19-19-16 3 games in a row and you're like, oh, it's all back. The problem is it's too much of this, you're kind of around and then you're not around. Yeah. Right. Because the 3 games before that run was 3 points, 2 points, 5 points. And it's just really pretty tough to have your starting point guard have performances like this. And it's so weird too, because man, for so long, Dinwiddie was really, I think, a pretty steadying force for this team. Love him, love him or leave him here. You kind of knew what you were getting. It would frustrate the fans at times, right? But you still knew kind of what was happening. It was going to be sort of like ISO dribble drive, high pick and roll, throw some lobs, get to the rim, complain at the ref about not getting fouled or not getting a foul call. But it kind of worked, right? And there's just none of it. It's all gone. It's all gone. They don't do any of that anymore. They don't run any of the pick and roll with him. They don't really let him top of the key cook. I'm not saying they should always do that, but it's just over that. If you watch videos of him last year at the end of the year compared to this year, it is legit 2 totally different things. It's night and day. It's different worlds. They're not even close to the same player, and it's highlighted in the game stats on a nightly basis almost.
And while I would be a little bit surprised if this was also the case, it's worth reminding that he's the oldest net on the roster, right? And listen, the precipice of when it starts to fall off a little bit usually doesn't come, midway through a game, halfway through a season, but there is something there about him maybe not having the same athletic burst that he used to. He still drives to the basket at times, but that step is a little bit slower. And then you roll it all into this ball of not being productive, and the hole that it opens up on inside of this roster. Now, tonight,
He
you
has
get
real quick. Let me just throw another stat at you. In his last 6 games, 6 games, he has 4 games where he did not attempt a free throw. 0 free throws in 4 of those 6 games. That
and we
which
talk
is
about
just
size. He's actually one of the bigger, quote, bigger guys for who they
it's
have
just
on
what
the
I'm
roster.
saying. It's like he's not going to the rim. He's not pressing the issue. They used to isolate him on bigger defenders and try to get switches onto those. That's gone. They don't do that anymore. And I don't know. Anyway, so it's just like you can see all these little signs. And he had that 3-game stretch where it looked better, right?
Yep.
The Lakers and Clippers and Portland, like he was, decently efficient, and the assists were there. But it's just too much of you're not sure on a nightly basis what you're getting. So anyway, this isn't all about Dinwiddie. I do not think Dinwiddie is the reason they lost this game, by the way. So it's not that. It's just highlighting these like very head scratching lines that you see from him that just frankly just don't make sense.
Yeah, from the last 27 games of last season after the trade where he went to the line almost 5 times per game, 4.7, this season 3.6. And if you went back and looked at it, you'd probably see that those numbers are descending from the start of the
2.8,
season.
2.8 in January, 2.8 free throws a game.
That's 2 free throw drop off from last year, right? Like, and you need that out of him specifically inside of this role. Now, the other thing here for me too, just to touch on a couple other points out of this game, because I think there's surprisingly a lot to kind of sink your teeth into, so to speak. Dennis Smith Jr., now he gets the bump, right? Less Spencer Dinwiddie. You see more Dennis Smith Jr., 29 minutes. He goes 4 and 9, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, like kind of everything you want here. Had 5 turnovers as well, though, and played dangerously with his 5 fouls down the stretch. It's interesting that Lonnie Walker only gets 12 minutes in this game here as well. And he had a bad shooting performance. But Jacques Vaughn had said ahead of this game, because people have kind of been asking, fans and media, hey, why not more Lonnie Walker? He's leading the league in 3-point shooting. He's 47%. Now, it's hard when Jacques Vaughn says, well, we ask certain things on both ends of the floor. So you can't, he had the underneath foul in the Clippers game out on the perimeter against Kawhi on the triple. So it's, hey, yeah, you're doing good things offensively, but you can't do that defensively. So you need to earn your way into those minutes. And it's just really, it's really hard. It's really hard to hear explanations like that, given just that you need guys playing, you need guys shooting. And I know it was a bad night for him in this instance, but it falls into this category because, to go a little long here, the other guy that's really been struggling lately is Dorian Finney-Smith. He's now, I believe, including tonight, 2 for his last 23 from beyond the arc. The 3-point shot has completely fallen off, and it just encapsulates a lack of willingness to do different things. Because guess what? Tonight, Dorian Finney-Smith still played 37 minutes in spite of a really bad shooting performance and being on a bad shooting run. I don't know what the easy answers are, but it just continues the theme of try new things, try different stuff. And Jacques Vaughn and this coaching staff is always a half a step behind it. The Spencer Dinwiddie decision almost seems like Spencer Dinwiddie made that decision for them with his play, right? It wasn't about them being proactive. They continue to be reactive in these moments.
Yeah, I just think I wonder if the players are starting to feel the strain of sort of not knowing, right? Like the minutes have just been jumbled. You're not sure. Sometimes I'm not even sure if guys are like on minutes limits. Like Cam Johnson played 25 minutes after starting the game really hot, had 19 points. He plays 25 minutes. Is that a hamstring related, or excuse me, a cramping related thing? Because they want to keep the minutes low, or is it just they can't find ways to get him back in games, like or they just don't trust it? I just don't know. If you look at these minutes on a nightly basis, which I do every single night, right? Like they're not one of the toughest teams to figure out, but they're not one of the easiest either. And that's usually a sign of like sort of just like discombobulation, or just like you don't know if you're coming or going. Like something, and I'm trying to think of other examples. Like, Utah was like this for a little bit, but they're like, maybe they're not like so motivated to win, right? And some teams like OKC, like their bench unit kind of changes a lot, but do you kind of trust that because they're winning? So I don't know. So it's like hard to really knock it. And when the going gets tough, you basically know who their 4 or 5 are going to be. Like these teams that are just kind of all over the place with minutes. I just don't. It's just they're just so hard to trust, and it's like sometimes they don't trust themselves, or it's like an overthinking process, or they don't really know, and it just seems to be happening on a nightly basis. They continue to run the same starters. I just don't know for how long. But it's also like I don't feel like they feel confident with any other group of 5. right? Like,
We
and
talked
so
about that, right? Like, name the other 5 that should be starting, or the swaps.
I mean, I can name other combinations. Like, there's other combinations. I think you could like start Dennis Smith Jr. and Cam Thomas instead of Spencer Dinwiddie and like Cam Johnson or something, right? Like, I don't know, do that, but they're not going to do that because those guys are veterans and they make more money. And I just don't think that that's like how the organization operates right now. And so that's not that. By the way, that's not correct, but it just seems to be like the way that they're sort of flowing. So I don't know, man. It's all disappointing. It's go ahead.
No, I know, and I know we'll talk about Cam Thomas a little bit in the post pod, obviously here too. I will just say, like, to drill down on it one last time, Cameron Johnson, you mentioned whether it's the hamstring, only 25 minutes in a game like this, 36 from McHale. Listen, you sold Brooklyn Nets organization that Cam Johnson could be the 2 to McHale Bridges 1. And in a game like this, you need 25, you need 30 from Cam Johnson, right? You need him to come in and give you that performance over 35 plus minutes in a game like this, and the Nets don't have that. So you try to cobble together some of your parts, and it just doesn't exist.
He hasn't played more than 30 minutes in a game in 3 weeks. Not 2 weeks. Sorry, 2 weeks. 25, 29, 23, 27, 23, 23. Some of these were close games too. Like, so it's not, and it's not foul trouble, and it's not because they're blowouts, right? Like, and so it's just, they must just want to cap it. They're worried about the cramping or whatever it is, or they just don't trust it or whatever the heck. All right. We're going to get out of here on the pod feed. We're going to stay around for a little bit. Got a lot of folks here. We already started some questions on the YouTube feed here. We're going to get right into some of these fan questions coming out of it. We'll do a Ben Simmons update for another episode because there is a Ben Simmons update, but we'll do that on a later episode. So if you have a question on YouTube, just put it at Locked On Nets. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Make sure you go to We Got Nets too. WeGotNets.com. Grab that free ebook. Some fun stories that Adam and I put together. Really happy with that. I'm really happy with what we got planned going for We Got Nets to do that as well.
Obviously, my friends, the greatest mistake you can make in life is to be continually fearing that you will make one. That's Elbert Hubbard.
Oh, Elbert or Elron? Which one?
Alberto.
Oh, Alberto, because I thought we were going to get like the weird religion thing with Elron, but we didn't. That's no problem. Yeah. Your one was one of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. Basketball.
Yeah. Oh, when the post-game podcast ends, the post-pod begins. Talking about everything, including the most recent game and everything on the fan base's mind. We dive in, baby boy. Coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Full vibes here on the Post Pod podcast, but I'm noticing visually of a certain age, you might associate this a little bit differently than I'd like you to. So I'm going to pop the top off on the glasses, break in everybody. As we always say, misery loves company, and certainly the Brooklyn Nets fan base has not been happy. Let's chop it up here with some of these. Ooh, Doug's got a whole bunch start up here. Not a lot of good
ones
here.
Yeah, we got a lot of really good ones. You can just pull. I can start pulling some up here.
Yeah, let's rock them off here. Let's start with Dwayne Green. Why was Cam Thomas not in the game down the stretch? He played well on both ends of the floor and was shooting 55%. Do you think that if he played more, we would have edged this one out? Kind of in theme with what we've talked about. He gives you a better chance, I'd say. But again, the team is just constructed to lose more games than they're going to win. But that's my take. I mean, do you agree? I mean, he should have played a ton. He should have played more minutes. He should have played 30 plus minutes. But here we are.
22 minutes. I don't get the minutes from him. 22 minutes, like it's too low. I mean, you have to. I mean, unless they just like he does take bad shots at times. He took a few bad ones in this game.
Can I say Van Gundy mentioned this on the TNT broadcast?
He's not wrong, by the way.
What?
Yeah. He was not. Van Gundy was not wrong. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it was. Cam Thomas makes a lot of very difficult shots, but he also takes a lot of very difficult shots. So he's willing to do it, right? Because he believes he can, and he can. You would probably say 85% of his looks are of the difficult variety because he wants to get him to a spot. He wants to try to make it. He thinks that he can be the leader of this team from a scoring perspective. And I think it does lead to some ugly looks sometimes and just some difficult shots that are more likely not to go down, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think he should still be in there for like 22 minutes. Feels a little low
Yeah.
too. Maybe they felt like he was just undersized. And Knicks do run, do trend pretty big. But like even with like Deuce McBride out there, I think he matches up okay. Like I said, they went that one Dinwiddie, Lonnie Walker, Cam Thomas lineup that's a total head scratcher. Thank God. Like it was almost like a mistake. Like Dinwiddie checked out so quickly that they were like, "Hey, what's going on here?" Like you checked. It's like Dinwiddie checked himself back in and he wasn't supposed to or something.
Warm-ups are off. Let's
Yeah, I don't
ride.
know.
Like, oh.
I'm done. I'll be honest with you. I'm done trying to figure out what the plan here is with him. Like we've guessed at this so many times. I can't guess anymore. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know how they view him. I don't know if they see him as an organizational piece or not. I don't know if they like him. Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm done trying to guess. None of it makes sense to me.
I will quickly.
It would make sense if they didn't like him. I could find reasons why. I don't think they shouldn't, or it makes sense for them to love him. I can make any case really. I just have no clue how they think about it. Like that's
right. Yeah. And my last quick thing on that is just that, again, hopefully this deadline does clarify some things. If we think Spencer Dinwiddie will be gone, if we think maybe Royce O'Neal, I don't think Dorian Finney-Smith will ultimately be gone potentially. But if Royce is gone, you clear some things out, and maybe that's just it, right? Like, hey, after the trade deadline, we turn the page, and Cam really starts to get full run on this team and what they want to do. Halcyon?
Halcyon, man. The Halcyon day. We're out of the Halcyon days. Yeah,
no, I'm a fan of JV, but I get why it's so hard to find lines as a coach. But there's definitely team chemistry issues. Size and point guard is a huge problem. Okay, and I would say too, like, hey, Jacques Vaughn is doing himself no favors here. But the roster's the roster, right? Like the problems they have are the problems they have. So that's not about JV. Now we can debate whether or not he's using them to the best of his, best of their ability and the best of the schemes that he puts together, right?
This is my case for why Jacques Vaughn will last the season. I think we talked about this in the podcast.
Yeah.
The reason I think that he will not be fired is this very reason. It's like they might not think he's the best coach. I don't even know. But they have to know the roster is so flawed that even if you brought another coach, it's like, well, how much would the next coach elevate it? I'm not sure, right? And it would just be such a risk to bring in a new coach to have them sort of like possibly fumble around with the same sort of inadequate roster. And I think if anything, that's why I think Jacques Vaughn's job is the safest, which is not correct, but like it's just what I think is going to happen.
You just watched the Bucks fire their coach on a 31-13 team because expectations and whatever. And
that's because Giannis and Lillard didn't like him. That's a little different.
It is, but by the way, same coach that it ended up not liking is the one that I don't know. There's a lot of things that came out about that. Since we're on the bonus, it's like he didn't want Nick Nurse. So he forced in a different direction Giannis, not wanting Nick Nurse, only to end up with a coach that he ultimately didn't want either. I find superstars just to be a lot of fun. I think they're great, and I can't wait until we get more of them. Just tweaking. The players with the ball, Bridges, Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, don't create open shots for Royce, DFS, Dinwiddie, and that's why those three fell off. We changed the way we play. I could actually make a case that in the very small 22 minutes, there were at least two more beyond the two assists that Thomas had, and he set up Claxton on a couple easy ones. He set up guys on the perimeter. The shots didn't go down. So, sometimes, again, good process, bad result, it can make it look like, it's not going the way that it should be.
Yeah, so I actually agree with a lot of this take here because I think
Johnson, I agree with 100% out of these three. Like, I think Johnson's a 0.
I think that like the problem is one way for you to be an all on ball creator. There are multiple ways, but a big way is for you to have your primary defender in a disadvantageous situation, right? Like you either get past them and now the other team needs to bring help, which the second you bring help, there should be theoretically a guy open somewhere, right? And so some of the best guys in the NBA, like people that create shots for others, will be able to get themselves like the good shots or just force the other team into having to sort of scramble
and
be out of position because you blew by your primary defender or you got a body on them or they're so good you have to bring help like sort of wherever they are. Because the Nets don't have those guys. Like watch Bridges during a game. He can kind of sometimes take his guy, and he was doing it sometimes tonight. No, he never gets doubled ever.
Right.
Like they never bring help. There's no scheme against him. It's kind of just like, hey, hopefully the primary defender can hold up and we'll just live with the results. And so like tonight he made some tough shots and they still won. Other nights it doesn't. But I agree with that statement. Like those guys can hit shots, But in the part where they do not create for others, I think they do not create for others because they mostly can't beat their guy. And in the case of Cam Thomas, he does not have great court vision. Like, so and I actually think he's getting better there, but I just don't think he has it there yet.
No, and I will say they don't because they can't, right? Like, and I guess the way that it gets said, and I'm not just tweaking it, it's a good point, but it's like, they're not actively choosing not to do it. They can't do it. And so it breaks down around that. But it's
again, just watch defensive schemes. Like, think about how how they scheme against like really, really good players. It's like, hey, we need to bring help. We need to hedge. We need to chip these guys. Like, we need to do something to kind of get them off. No one does that against the Nets. Every once in a while, you see when Cam's cooking, you'll see them blitz him a little bit. That's like literally the only thing. Like that, none of the rest of it's pretty base. Like, you don't need to do a lot of crazy stuff. And then in the case of like the Clippers, you can just kind of hold up with your main defenders and then just crush them on the other side of the court by going small or something like that. Like, I don't know. There's problems here.
Now, this from Al Mack may have been directed at the full chat as well, but you guys don't have any patience. I don't think he's speaking just to us. I think he's speaking to everybody here, but we'll respond. The team might have to suck for a couple of years. One day, those Suns picks will pay off if you don't panic, sell the vets, and embrace being a bad team. We generally agree with this perspective that is what you should be doing, and it should be okay to feel patient about it. But again, I think our response to, we're responding to what the organization said was going to be the path, right? Going to stay competitive, going to be a playoff team, have talented guys. If it turns out that Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson are just not those versions of those players, then it does at least change it. And I think some segment of the fan base is just going to take a little bit longer to come around to the fact of like, oh, we're never going to be a team that's only winning 20-something games. Oh, sorry, it may actually be happening right now. Like, you're already in it. And I think the idea was you'll get a good year, maybe a good 2 years before we maybe start to approach that or make a bigger swing.
Yeah. I would say I can have patience. I'm happy to have patience around what you think is like a good solid plan. I'm concerned that they don't have a good solid plan. Like, I can have all the patience in the world.
I don't think they have a direction, right? Like, they haven't declared themselves.
We said in the last episode, like, I could have patience if they tried to strip it down and they lost these picks to the Rockets. It would suck, but I would sure be talking about the team in a different way.
Yep.
Like, it's the frustration is that you're just not, it's so unclear. That's what it is. It's not that we're fully aware of the situation.
Yeah.
It's that I just don't know if they have if they understand what the clear path is.
Nader, hoping to see you in the next presidential run. Was really hoping Cam Thomas would get 35 minutes a game after the trade deadline, but it will never happen under JV. That could very well be the case. Again, Doug said it before. We're not entirely sure, if they have a problem with him, if they don't have a problem with him, what exactly their feelings are around him. This would be a case, coming just off that last one, I would have a little bit of patience on this, just in the sense that things could look dramatically different after the trade deadline. And if they make certain decisions around veterans, then we'll know very fast, because either Cam Thomas starts playing 30 plus and 35 minutes a night, or they must hate his guts, because then we'll get to a place here potentially where there'd be no excuse not to be giving him long run and allowing him to develop, even more so than there already is.
Sorry, I was reading through some comments. Who's that about, Cam Thomas?
Yeah, that was a good one. It was Cam Thomas. He should be playing more, and maybe after the deadline he gets there. We don't need to bat that one back.
He should be playing more. It's like it makes no sense with the way this team is now, unless you like for sure knew that he wasn't part of the team, and I don't think they actually think that. Then there should be ways for him to play through some of these flaws and to really get coached up on the ways to improve, like better court vision, quicker passes out of doubles. Don't take wild shots, like try to cut down your wild shots down by like 25%, something like that, right? With like, maybe some implications around not being, doing it, but also allowed to run the offense as a point guard for short periods and just live with the downsides. It's very clear to me that they should be trying these things. But I just don't think they want to.
And not that I want to give the organization or the coaching staff any type of wiggle room on this, but it's also like, I know he's in year number 3, so we're kind of beyond that threshold, but it's like, hey, listen, if you're taking this very long developmental approach with him, I can tolerate it to an extent. Again, the results of this season are only heightening the questions about other things, including Cam Thomas. We said that he should have probably been starting to begin this year. There was a case to be made that he should have been very close to 6-man, obviously big minutes, get into the starting lineup, etc. And they didn't do it last year down the stretch developing him, so they clearly have a flawed process. This genre, is a good conversation topic, potentially for an entire episode. I would put a question mark here. Should Mikal Bridges consider requesting a trade from the Brooklyn Nets? He's not at the star level where you think he's capable of doing that, but if you're Mikal
Jonathan
Bridges,
Kuminga asked for a trade, so Buddy Hield asked for a trade. You can ask for a trade if you want to. It's
honestly though, we've talked about it as, should the Brooklyn Nets be willing to take offers? Should they be open to anybody and everybody? What about the two-way street, right? Like, what if some of the guys here walk in the door and go, I know you said XYZ, but guess what? It doesn't look like you guys are fulfilling that path. And that may include whether or not the Nets are going to go add a player at the deadline or if they're going to kind of stand pat. You said this last episode. You think Mikal Bridges wanted to be signed up for, hey, like making decent money, you're the face of the franchise, a franchise that stinks? Like that's what your legacy is going to be, helping the team ride to the rebuild over the next 2 or 3 seasons. I do find this at least a little bit fascinating from like that.
Yeah, level. An interesting quote after the game. I was kind of checking in on some post-game quotes while we were podcasting, and he was like, he registered some disappointment about how loud it was in favor of Knicks fans at Barclays tonight, which was like completely evident, right? It's like, and I don't really it's funny. This kind of thing does not bother me. I know there are fans out there that this will bother. Like, this is just not something I get too wrapped up in, but
bothers players though.
But it clearly bothered him. And he was, I don't know if he was asked about it or if he was just commenting on it. Cause he said, it's not fun when you feel like you're in an away game at home. And so he went on to say it a little more. So I don't know. It's probably nothing, but on the heels of, would Mikal Bridges ask for trade? I don't think he would. At least right now. I don't think that's likely, and I think it's like I put like 1% or something like that. But the fact that I wouldn't put it at 0. So
yeah, I would say maybe, and we can get into it deeper another day potentially. But like I would say next trade deadline, I think a very likely conversation we would be having is Mikal Bridges and Sean Marks met. The organization met behind closed doors and have agreed to kind of, figure out what next steps should be, right? Like we kind of both agree we should go in a different direction here potentially. Rob Monroe, I love the play on spelling here. What a fantastic job. How would you assess this organization's development of Cam and Clax? On Cam Thomas, we already talked about, I think it's just been way too slow. Nicholas Claxton, I think, has been pretty good overall. The problem is that he's if you say he should have developed a shot, I don't know if that's a part of him. He should have gotten stronger, bigger, maybe. I think he's a very good player, but he has a very specific role, and then that's just a function of him. Cam Thomas is just like, hey, we're 3 years in, and we're still waiting for the journey to begin in a lot of ways.
I mean, if you go by where guys are taken in the draft and where they are now into a contract, how can you look at Claxton as anything else but like a resounding W? It's a massively great story. I know expectations and the goalposts start shifting as you get better.
Yeah,
this guy was the 31st pick in the second. He was in the second round. And now we're 4 years later, and he's going to get like 20 million as a free agent. Like, that's great development. I don't like now whether you want to put it on the player or the organization. I mean, that's up to you. But I don't see how you look at the development of Claxton as anything else but like a huge win. But I know how the conversation begins to change because he was like, oh, last year he was in the defensive player of the year category. Right. I mean, part of that was he was really good, and part of that was Kevin Durant was on the team. Yep. And that matters when you're talking about these DPOY stuff. So I think in terms of him, I think it's just, I mean, it's such a massive W. I can't really put it any other way. With Cam, I mean, he's also probably played above draft slot. Sometimes I can't tell what's chicken or the egg with him, but right. At this point, but like I said, I think I'm out of the guessing on Cam Thomas game. I think I need to take that out of my repertoire. I'm not good at it.
One other thing before we hit this last one from Jay, I will say that there's no world where the Nets are thinking about this like this, but we know that conversation. They were having this around the Knicks and Jalen Brunson. Can your best player be a small guard, right, and win a championship? And historically speaking, no, you can't be. And I just wonder in the grand scheme, this isn't about the organization, about Cam Thomas as an individual, but it's like if you're tracking him in 2 years to maybe be the best player on your roster, what are you tracking yourself towards, right? Like, again, high level scorer, but we've seen a lot of iterations of a lot of teams around the league over the last 20 years that do not win at a high level when this ends up being the guy. I don't think it's informing anything they're doing right now, but it's just an interesting footnote. One of your best developing young players is also a guy whose talent will be mitigated unless you make the big moves, unless you go for superstars, and then he is your number 2 or 3 behind a real stud, right? If he was playing with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving off ball, or on ball with Kyrie playing the 2 guard, yeah, it probably would have been amazing. If only that was an opportunity that's had at any point along the way to test out and see how it could have functioned.
This will be interesting. I can get out of here in a second, but this year will be interesting because there's a lot of teams that are really in the mix, like of championship caliber, I would say. They're all built like mostly pretty differently from each other, but they're all kind of built the same too, which is like they have, high-end talent, but mostly like they have, big wings or big centers.
Yeah.
And like that is kind of the formula, because if you look at like the Celtics, it's like, they're huge and they have like, wings that can score. Obviously the Bucks, that 30, it's so funny. Is there another coach that's been 30-13 that's gotten fired? Like that's crazy. 30-13. They're like, get out of here. But they have Giannis and Lopez, and they're going to deal with Dame. And then obviously the Sixers with Embiid, and we'll see where the Cavs end up landing. Their Cavs will be an interesting test case for what you were saying, because they're built a little bit differently, like a little more just kind of guard heavy, but then they've been really good. And they've also had play without Garland and Mobley. And then you go to the West, and it's like Shea surrounded by some like bigger wings and, maybe a generational center. And then you got the Wolves, who are huge, and Nuggets, who are, pretty damn big, and the Clippers, who are big and guys score on the ball. Anyway, long story short is
matchups are going to be fascinating, right? Matchups.
They're like they're all built kind of differently, but they're all kind of not built that differently. Right. It's like, they're huge, and they have some on-ball creators that are also kind of huge. And then they kind of mix and match other talents in different ways. And when you just look at that, it's like, how do the Nets stack? They just don't, right? Like they just don't stack with those kinds of guys. And sometimes you can do your best job of deciding where a team would land by looking at the good teams and think of how many Nets guys would start for those teams.
Yeah. You've brought this up before, and you're like, it gets interesting when you start to do that.
Go take this Nets roster and do the exercise where you put these guys onto another team. How many Bridges starts for probably everybody, and everyone else is kind of a question mark.
Yep.
It's going to kind of depend on the team. And I think if you just I write down the Claxton, by the way. And I think if you look at it that way, you start to get a sense of where the Nets are, because these guys just aren't walking onto the other teams and playing that much.
Yeah. An 80% bench, 95% bench roster, effectively, then is what we're saying, is a hard team to win a lot of basketball games. Last one, Jay, didn't want to leave you out here. Has JV lost the locker room? He lost a lot of respect with that Bucks benching and all the curious shots of his players in the media. Seems like they want him fired, and I agree. I don't know if they want him fired or not, but I will say, especially after that Bucks one, like another instance of Mikal Bridges, like, he was not happy about the idea of not playing, of not going the full boat, of being taken out and effectively rested, right? Like, I at a minimum, when you are not a great basketball team, or even a good one right now, which the Nets are not, as a head coach, I think there is some level where, like, you need to be pretty in tune with where the personality of your team is, right? The pulse of these guys, and win or lose, they're likely to have your back if they feel like you've been serving kind of their agendas on the court, right? So there's been a lot of head scratching moments for Jacque Vaughn, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least some segment that doesn't want him there.
Oh yeah. By the way, I'm sorry. I know we're in the bonus part of that. I missed what you said. I was arguing with someone about teams that Claxton wouldn't start for.
Honestly, it was such a good commentary that I provided. It would have only been damaged if you had given any feedback. So that's the good news there.
By the way, real quick, that wasn't a knock on Claxton. I'm just saying he's actually X'd out because some of these other teams just have awesome centers. So it's
by the way, some of the reason people want to trade potentially for Claxton is because they're like, oh, if we had him, not a knock on him, coming off the bench for us, oh my God, if he was our versatile weapon that you could use differently, 100%.
Yeah, that's not a knock on him. It's like he's not going to start over Embiid. He's not going to start over Jokic. He's not going to start over Giannis and Lopez. He's not going to start him over Jared Allen.
I would do that.
Like, he wouldn't start over Rudy Gobert. He wouldn't start over Chet, although he could start next to Chet. Like, and so that's more what it is. It's like, he's not. Sometimes you can get X'd out of situations because you're not versatile enough. That's probably that's more of his thing. It's like he's just not. He can only play the 5, and when you can only play the 5, you can't play 2 5s together. When you're a 3, a small forward wing type, as 3-4. Well, that mixes and matches a lot better. So you can fit in better. When you're a small 1 like Brunson, or like you're a big 5 like Claxton, right, who can't stretch the floor, well, that just does limit the number of teams you can play on. It's not necessarily knocks on them. It's just that it's harder to mix and match guys at the opposite end of the positional curve. Like in the middle, it's easier to kind of plug and play. That's all I meant.
Yeah, 100%. So at the end of the day, the Nets lose another one here. We keep getting closer to the trade deadline. We'll see what comes up next. We have things about the Ben Simmons update coming up. We're going to discuss. We have things about the trades. Obviously, Terry Rozier going to the Miami Heat. The conversations around fallout from a Lakers-Atlanta trade, and if the Nets should be interested in ending up with D'Angelo Russell back on the roster. So we have a lot of things for off days we're going to talk about in between now and next week. So just be locked in, right? Doug, you take us out the door. I mean, that's your job. So pipe up.
I'm still arguing about this Claxon thing because everyone misunderstood what I was saying. So
you get us over on YouTube, obviously at Locked On Nets. Subscribe. We love subscribers. We're pushing towards 7,000. We appreciate all the support. As Doug would tell you, it may be a little old hat. You go to a podcast feed, give us a 5-star review. If it's not 5 stars, don't give the review. Find someone you love, tell them to give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. And obviously on Twitter, Locked On Nets, at Doug Norrie, at Adam Armbrecht. We'll be back again tomorrow, breaking it all down. I was trying to find a quote here. Let's do it on the fly. This always goes really well for me. If your thoughts are as tall as the height of your ceiling, you can't fly above your room. Man, that's a really good quote. I wish it wasn't from Anonymous. We'll see you next time. Talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball. I flew solo on this episode. What a great job by me. Basketball, solo show, basketball. Yeah.